too.
Well, I know, my family's in Newport Richey, so I'm always spying a place to come back to Newport Richey, but, you know, Safety Harbor's pretty good too.
That's right.
Okay, let me get my stuff.
And we'll start with some of the other stuff first. Call to order the Comprehensive Land Use Planning Committee meeting. First off, let's stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, could we have the roll call, please?
Chairman Matthew Coppler,
Here.
Member Todd McClary,
Here.
Member Johnny R. Cooper,
Here.
Member Denise McKenzie.
All right. That's the red. I'm not used to that. You guys handle that, or you handle it up here, so I never have to worry about that.
I usually have Tom shutting it off on me, so.
Do we have any comments from the general public? Nobody has signed up. Is there anybody that didn't sign up that would like to make any comments? Seeing none, last chance. No? Okay. Comments from the city manager and committee members. I have no comments for tonight.
None from either.
Start? No. Okay. Did we kill enough time?
Yes, let me come on. You ready?
Yeah, so we'll go to the first item, which is the comprehensive land use plan update for waterfront overlay district. And at the last meeting, our planning consultant, Tammy Verana, was here and spoke about the scope of services. She has gone back and sharpened the pencil.
Are we doing scope of services first, or we?
Yeah, if we could.
Okay, gotta get a different file for that then.
That's how the agenda is structured, so I'm trying to follow agenda.
Yes, it is. Oh, I'll introduce myself. How about that?
Yes.
Hey, Verana Consulting, Safety Harbor, Florida.
Sag issue there. What's going on?
Okay, hold on.
It's been a long day. That's right.
It's feeling like I'm feeling right now. Okay, here we go. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And documents, sorry. Get down here to my Port Richey file. And I believe, there we go. Okay, we have this. Okay. I won't look at that because that's not what we're having. So we had met last time, I think it was early February, and we went over a scope of services. So I took your feedback. I understand that a guiding principle is that you want to have a lot of community engagement. So we tweaked it a bit to where we would first, our first task would just be developing a project understanding. And this would be a collaborative effort between my company and Ayers Engineering, who has a very robust master planning and graphic services or graphic illustration capabilities, which I think is an excellent complement to the type of planning that I do, which is more policy planning, comp planning, and land development codes. So it's kind of a marriage of the physical planning with some of the regulatory and policy aspects. And then, of course, for community engagement, pictures are super important. So especially in this type of a project. The second task would be data gathering, discovery, and assessments, where we would actually develop a community outreach plan. So how to figure out how to get the information out as broad as possible, because later in this process there'll be a visual preference survey. It's an actual online survey that people can go to, and they can indicate what their preferences are across a lot of different types of physical aspects of development, so buildings and streetscape and vegetations, whatever we decide that the things that you would like the community to weigh in on. If we rely just on a meeting, we may not capture everyone. Not everyone has the luxury of time to come to a public meeting. They have families and getting kids to soccer and work and all sorts of things. So we're looking at more of a hybrid approach where you can either participate in this visual preference survey online and then come to an in-person meeting, or if you don't have the ability to do an online survey, we could provide that to you in paper, or you could come to the meeting and there'd also be a station there that you could put that, take the survey. Also important about the online survey is it would be open for, I would say, at least 2 weeks, as long as you're comfortable with, just so we can kind of see we can monitor how many people are taking the survey, and then we can do different pushes of information out or figure out, why we might be not having as good a response as we would like. So that gives you some opportunities to sort of like shake the bushes a little harder just to be able to get those numbers up. Because really with a visual preference survey, the more input, the better. It makes the statistical results more, give more confidence to those results. And then just for the audience, the visual preference survey provides a scale, so it shows images, essentially from one end of you like it or you don't like it, and then there's, possibly 5 or 10 points in between that you would indicate, well, I like it moderately, or I'm neutral on it, or I dislike it a lot, and that's actually a data point that's analyzed statistically to understand what the community's preferences are, and conversely what they may not like. Then after the visual preference survey, or at the end of the visual preference survey, we would have a community visioning workshop. This would be an open house that would be essentially open between, and this is proposed, we're always open to discussion, but between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m., so that could capture people who don't necessarily want to come out later in the evening, but then also allow time for people who are traveling in from work someplace outside the Pasco County. And then what we would do at that meeting is we would have a publicized time, maybe do the presentation twice. If there, maybe there's one that starts at 4:30 and then another one that starts at 6:30, so you can have an opportunity to capture either one of those live presentations, or we could put the presentation in a voiceover PowerPoint, which is what we do a lot of times for some of the Department of Transportation projects. Well, they'll just have a video on loop. So you could go to that station, you could get a good background on what it is that the whole purpose and scope of the project is, or the process, and then you could go about interacting with the rest of or participating in the rest of the visioning workshop activities. The next would be what we're calling a data walk station. So there would be stations set up around the room that provide information on various aspects of, what we look at in planning. What are the existing regulations and policies that affect this planning area? What are the trends? What are the conditions there? How much upland, lowland, how much parking, just whatever data that we can pull that makes sense to really give people a good, accurate portrayal of what we're dealing with in the Cody River Landing area. I know that early on with the Waterfront Overlay District, there was a piece of on the east side of US 19 that was considered in that overall district, and I don't know if that's a piece that we include in the future, so that's another aspect too, is where should this planning area be? Is it just on the west side of US 19, or is it also on the east side of US 19 as originally envisioned, I believe, back in the late 90s? I think, Mr. Mayor, you had suggested that instead of doing a walking audit, which I know that we felt wasn't not very practical, that we would do a Google Earth station, and there could be someone there kind of replicating a walking audit with the Google Earth, so we could zoom in and look at things that may be of interest, to answer questions. And then a tabletop mapping activity. So that would be small groups sitting around a big, large scale map, or small scale, or whichever way you look at it. And then to be able to mark some of their preferences on that map. So that would be facilitated and help people kind of walk through the steps of laying out a physical vision for the Cody River Landing area. And then, as I mentioned, a visual preference survey station where people could take the survey at that time. Okay, so do you want to answer any or ask any questions relative to the workshop before I go forward into the next part?
Well, my question, I guess, is tied in partially to the next part, which you're going to be talking about. But obviously, even though we put it up between 4 and 8 p.m., I'm assuming we're going to have a recording of the presentations or something that can be posted onto the web page, so people who can't make it from 4 to 8 still are fully involved and still can provide feedback.
Yes.
Capture.
Well, for effective community engagement, you have to really kind of spread it out. So we always say before, during, and after. And that after, a lot of times people don't find out about it until after it's done. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I missed my opportunity. But we would put, we would essentially package that workshop, not as interactive, of course, because you're not in the same room, but put information on the project webpage so that people could roll through it. They could see what I guess we'll be looking at the feedback and doing some recommendations, but the preliminary, the raw data, we could put up on that website and people could scroll through it, and then also provide an opportunity for comments. Like they could say, I agree or disagree, or I have other ideas, or what about this suggestion? So that's also, something that we can work out as to what input that you want after the meeting.
Yeah, so part of the web page, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit on you, but
Okay.
so it would also include like the Google Earth walkthrough on this web page. So it is the redevelop Cody River Landing web page.
Yeah.
And what do you want to see? And here it is, and here's what we're thinking. Here's the vision boards, and here's the map, and here's everything. And oh, by the way, what do you think? Love it, hate it, somewhere in between.
And I think also like what you did for the CRA vision workshop that you did, having some information out here in the lobby is at least people know that they could come and look at it physically. Not everybody feels, maybe you have a small screen and you can't see things as well, but having a couple of modes for people to access the information and provide comments. Another thing that, aside from a really robust outreach process cannot be undervalued, you really try to, I don't know if with your utility bills have a spot for that. We could have a QR code that gets you to the survey. Press release, working with the different community organizations, the faith-based organizations in town. And I always have success, or have had success, just asking people to ask. I always joke, say, bring 10 other people with you, or ask 10 people to take the survey. And, it's, I think people really, they take that to heart, because they know that the city wants to have input, and not everybody hears about things the same way. I personally am not on Facebook, so I feel like I'm a little bit under a rock sometime in my community, but I always have people who tell me. So, I think that we reach out to those ambassadors, so to speak, for different segments of the community to make sure that we have good awareness. That awareness is what we can achieve. We can't necessarily make them come to a meeting. Another aspect that, because I was talking with Benoit Paniker with AIRS this afternoon, and I had spoken with the city manager that, there is an interest in robust engagement. We could have more meetings, but would we really achieve more participation? But some things that we've done in the past is something called like a meeting in a box, and it would require some level of effort to maybe put the box together, but it would be almost the meeting contents that you could take home and maybe host a group of your friends around your kitchen table or your coffee table. And so that's another way of doing it. But there's many things that we can do. It's all a matter of time and effort. So
I think during this process, you don't get the same type of engagement as when people come physically to the workshop. But again, we could put a lot of the same stuff on the website at the same time we're trying to do the visioning as well.
Certainly.
And again, if you can't make it there, for the most part, you'll have everything on the website. You can answer all the questions.
And overall, this is a pretty short process, right? So I think we looked at maybe wrapping up in May or June, but all those processes could be parallel, and there would be a point when we'd want to cut it off so we could start analyzing and making recommendations. But I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to have all those different methods available for as long as possible. So then after we received all the input and we gave them a nice time frame, so please get your information in by X date, then we would take all that information back from the visual preference survey and all the other input that was received at the workshop, and to just synthesize it, make some sense of it, and see where it leads us to in terms of a vision. So essentially, what is the future of Cody River Landing? What is the community, what would they like to see? Then as another engagement opportunity, we would come back to a city council workshop that provided a lot of opportunity for the public to come and stand up and express themselves regarding the feedback that they heard. And then, and after that workshop, we would go back and develop a scope which would outline what the needs were for your comprehensive plan and also your land development code and any other sort of programmatic things that needed to be addressed after, towards achieving your vision, your community's vision. So that is it in a nutshell. It looks like we would do that first task, just project understanding, have that done in March. For task 2, which would be the visual preference survey, we're looking at towards the end of April. That's the community workshop. And then the task 3, where you've got the feedback and recommendations, concluding that in May. And granted, it always takes time to get things started, so these are, flexible. They're just sort of starting points.
Aspirational.
They're aspirational, exactly. Good word.
Any questions? Comments?
Yes, I think it's great. I think you captured everything that we talked about in the last meeting. I think this is a great path forward for it. Cost-wise, I think it's very economical.
We did a lot of,
Yep.
I'm sensitive to budget with my smaller communities, and so
Yeah,
I'm glad that you appreciate that. Because
yeah, I think, for the bang we're getting, it's very good for the buck. Obviously, this is in council, and they'll probably talk about the money itself. I don't know
Yeah.
if this even falls before council or not, but I think it's very good for that cost. The couple comments I do have is, one, for in item D, you have the project webpage. My recommendation is, and maybe this is your plan already, I don't know, but I would establish the project webpage immediately in task A, and make it the single point of contact throughout. So when you're doing your visual preference survey, it's always one point, they're always going to the same spot, no matter
Yes.
what it is, all the way through. I would also increase the time for the visual preference survey to 3 weeks at least,
yeah,
just
that's,
to capture.
we just said it needs to be at least 2 full
Yeah,
weekends.
I would get it, the longer, the better.
And the idea was to have a workshop or a web page from the beginning.
Okay.
Just wanted to make it clear that the workshop was the post-workshop opportunity was a web page.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So it's a project webpage, no matter what.
Yeah, and I think we set that up, like you said, right from the get-go, because really to have an outreach effort without a web page is a lost
And
opportunity.
then it has the opportunity to hit all of the various Facebook. I know there's, I guess, a half a dozen now Port Richey Facebook web pages outside of the city, and then it's a simple link all the way through. And then,
Yep.
that time, and not everyone checks their Facebook daily, so the longer the better for that preference survey, and really for the rest of it as well. So that was my comments. I mean, other than that, I don't have anything else to talk about.
The only comment I have, obviously, it's difficult to make sure that it's just the Port Richey residents that are providing feedback. Obviously, people around us, the city their feedback is important too, but not as important as actual residents that have to actually live close to this area and whatnot. So is there an idea of how you can police that to a certain degree? Or
So with the actual online survey, you could request
address?
code, if, I mean, a zip code. I
Zip
don't-
code was too broad.
Yeah, zip code would go out.
You could ask what neighborhood you live in or that sort of thing, like you live in
Or what street.
outside, I live in the city. A lot of times people don't know exactly.
A lot of people don't know where they
Yeah,
live.
so we could,
Probably the street. What street do you live on?
Yeah,
And
that'd
then,
be close enough.
yeah, that'd be close enough.
yeah, just with certain ones that went into Newport Richie, but yeah, I think that would be close enough. Otherwise, you know, public meetings are public meetings, everybody can come, but you do want to kind of segregate if you can, city
We can-
city input,
I'll
yeah.
get data up a little bit so we know who's coming from the residence side as opposed to outside.
Yeah, and then also at the workshop, and it wouldn't really necessarily like pin residency on an individual participant, but sometimes we'll put a map up that says, you know, where do you live? So we can see the dots. Or where do you live or where do you work? It depends on, you know, because maybe you want to have the business community in Port Richey also weigh in. If, but, you know, just that's up to you as to however you want to collect that data. But I think that would be good information to have going forward.
No, and like I said, I appreciate all feedback, right? There's even a neighbor, if you live right outside the line, you know, that's good opinion to have if they're willing to participate. But as we collect that, if we could actually at least have a way to get back to the core residents as well to see what their thoughts are. Is it the same
And to
as the
find out
others?
which areas of the city were represented and if there were areas that were not. And sometimes we'll go back and we'll figure out a way to get input if it looks as though certain segments, you know, sometimes in communities where we're looking for low-income households to be participants in whatever kind of planning project, we can go back to those locations and try to do something with a community organization or a church or something where there's a kind of an established organization to kind of help us get that information, because we want to make sure that there's good representation across the community.
Just the important part, honestly, is to have that data point in the beginning. So you don't
Absolutely.
collect all this information like, oh, you know, I forgot to find out who these people are.
Or if you don't have the data to begin with and you can't tell.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Thanks.
No, I was going to bring up the same comment.
okay.
Anything else?
Okay, so,
I concur as well. It's looks good price wise and that for the amount of work we're getting out of it. I think you did a very nice job getting all the points covered.
thank you. And I'll try to go back and work in a couple of the questions that you, just so that those are abundantly clear within the scope, and then I'll get those back to you, Matt, and you can go forward. So, okay.
I guess one comment I do have, I know, you know, part of our oh, sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. I was getting ready to go to the public, see if there's.
Oh,
but
okay.
I was waiting because I figured you'd have something. So
The end dates aren't set in stone, correct? I mean, we're going to
Yeah.
make it fun. Okay,
yeah,
that was it.
yeah. I mean, I think that's why I termed it aspirational.
If you want to, I know I always tend to like try to, you know, I try to make it as accommodating to what you might need, but certainly to spread that out, you know, not too long, because you want to make sure that it's all fresh in everybody's heads and not people don't get lost in the process. But certainly we could add more time to that.
Now I'm done.
Is there any public comment on this?
See, they didn't want to talk anyway.
Did you have another comment then, real quick?
No, I'm good.
Okay. And so the next step with that is we'll be taking it to City Council to get the funding piece locked in. And
You
then
could vote on it right here.
Oh, we good.
almost. Next item is the comprehensive land use plan update for peril of flood, which I know is why everyone is here, actually.
Oh, really?
Topic.
Hot topic?
No.
It is a hot topic. It is everywhere. It's a wet topic. Oh my
It's
gosh.
a very, very recent topic. I'll say.
Sorry, my. I just had it up and then it went away. Let me try it again. Okay, I think I can do this maybe without, but it helps me a little bit. So this is just informational, of course, all your stuff's informational. But this is just an introduction to the conservation and coastal management element where the peril of flood policies will reside. The city has an element, has actually probably, I'm thinking there's probably 8 or 9 elements in your comprehensive plan. This is just one of them. Last year, we did an evaluation of your comprehensive plan to see how it stacked up with state statutes, which are always changing. And so we did a report and we came up with a list of things that needed to be updated in the comprehensive plan. And I've also said numerous times that you do have a 2020 comprehensive plan, which means that that's the horizon date, so we're beyond that. So we do need to do some adjustments but that's, if we get through this process with the state, at least you'll be square with that and you can think about bigger things as you have time to. So let's just get into here. Currently, your conservation and coastal management element, which in some communities is separate. Not every community has a coastal management element. Those are only local governments within a coastal zone that have to have a coastal management element. I think back in the day, you did have 2 elements. Now there's 1 element, but essentially they're separated. So you've got topics, these goals, objectives, and policy topics on the left that are just related to conservation, but then you also have those that are coastal management related. A lot of the topics are the same, but because I think you're entirely within a coastal zone, so we're kind of repeating ourselves on natural resources, like here are the natural resources and here are the natural resources in the coastal zone. So I have a different idea, so I'm going to pitch those to you. So, I thought I put these all together, but so this is what my ideas are. I have 5 goals, and it would be integrated conservation coastal management element. The first relating to natural and also cultural resources are required by state statute to be addressed in this plan. So we would look at, regardless of whether or not it's considered coastal or non-coastal, we would have sensitive lands and water, potable water resources, air quality, energy resources, cultural resources, and water-dependent land uses. And these are the requirements per Chapter 163, Part 2, the requirements for the conservation and coastal management area that relate to natural and cultural resources. The next goal is coastal resiliency, and there would be a goal. I'd have a goal written for it, but right now it's truncated. The topics are risk assessment and mapping, so understanding what the data, how the data is changing, and informing your policies based on, so this would be a policy that says, assess your risk periodically and map your findings. Then there would be resiliency as it relates to public infrastructure, as it relates to natural flood protection, such as living shorelines or low impact development, like bioswales. I guess that's one that's skipping ahead here. Land planning and regulations would be more low impact development. So how do you develop land so that you have more area for stormwater to seep into the ground and to be captured where it falls, as opposed to, when it runs off and it gets faster and it does erosion and it ends up someplace that you don't want it to, then that's one way of handling it. And really with flood prevention, it's a lot of things all together to solve. It's a really big problem. The next one is building standards. So are you building out of the water? Are you building away from the water? Resilience partnerships. So your partnerships with Pasco County, maybe with Newport Richey, with the state definitely, and federal. So what sort of partnerships, particularly as it relates to funding, would be worthwhile? And then risk financing, insurance. I'm sure all of you are are aware of the FEMA's community rating system through the National Flood Insurance Program. When you do more things in your local government, then you get those additional credits and it helps bring down your flood insurance rates. And then finally, just monitoring and evaluating over time and making adjustments as needed. And over to the right, I put in the peril of flood, because, and as we'll go through in a little bit, those specific requirements of Chapter 163, Part 2 regarding peril of flood, I'm thinking would live in this coastal resiliency section. Later on, we're going to have a goal that's called post-disaster redevelopment and evacuation. But really, a lot of these steps that you would take are before post-disaster, or like before a disaster hits. So especially as it relates to how you're regulating development today as it's coming in, as opposed to how are you regulating development when you're trying to rebuild after a disaster. So a little aside there. So the peril of flood has 6 different provisions. And the first relates to principles, strategies, and solutions that reduce the flood risk from, and these things are specifically mentioned, high tides, storm surge, flash floods, stormwater runoff, and the related impacts of sea level rise. The second one are best practices for development that result in the removal of coastal property from flood zone designations. And you may be, I'm sure you're aware of the repetitive loss floodplain programs where properties are taken, they're, the government comes in, I'm not quite sure how that whole process works, but they'll buy that property and then it's not developable anymore. And I know you've got some vacant lots in your town that have been taken development out of the flood zone as a result of that process. Number 3 is site development techniques and best practices that reduce losses due to flooding and claims. So making sure that you're not developing in risky areas, you're building out of the water, or you're doing things to help mitigate for the water that will eventually come to the community. Number 4 is to be consistent with or more stringent than the flood-resistant construction requirements in the Florida Building Code and the applicable floodplain management regulations, which I'm sure that you are doing right now. And number 5 is to require construction activities seaward of the coastal construction control line, which I think is not in your, I think the coastal it's outside. I don't know that there's is there a coastal, I can't even say it, coastal construction control line? I don't know if there's any developable land in that. Seems like I looked at that before and it's out. Yeah, it's more like Clearwater Beach probably has. And then also to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program that I just mentioned, which you are. So those are the 6 things that need to be hit, which I think the biggest ones would be these. So what sort of policies that you would have to put into place that would guide the development of regulations or programs or things to create to reduce those perils of flood. So as I mentioned before, goal 3 is emergency preparedness and evacuation is goal 3, and goal 4 is post-disaster redevelopment. And a lot of the post-disaster redevelopment deals with, how are you handling repairs and redevelopment, because everybody wants to get back online as quickly as possible. Sometimes you waive certain things, but you also want to end up with good quality, safe construction at the end. So that's a policy decision that your city council will make. And then also limiting your infrastructure expenditures in places that are vulnerable to, so if you're going back in and you're reestablishing infrastructure after a disaster, do you assess that and say, well, is this the way we should do it? Should we put it back the way it was, or is there some other way that we can do that? And then the last one, very, very important, especially in times of disaster, is stakeholder engagement, community engagement. People need to be aware of what they can do, their personal decisions and actions that they can make to make their properties less vulnerable to flooding. Community engagement, so having people involved in the policy making and the program development. Engaging your collaborative partners, as I mentioned before, local, regional, state, and federal, and then having a robust network of channels to make sure that the information goes out. So it's not just a flyer, it's not just a Facebook page, but it's kind of that whole suite of how do you get the information out to the corners of the community? Because not everybody's on Facebook and not everybody reads the newspaper. And not everybody has a television set anymore to watch the news. So this next step, I'm not really going to go into depth, but you are all aware that there was an adaptation plan developed by the city, and it was, I think, what was it? Is it April or November of 2023? I can't see this. I have not been progressing my slides.
November.
There we go. But essentially, these are the overarching recommendations, the categories. So the first would be that data-driven aspect of understanding, what's happening with conditions, what are the trends, and using that data to develop your capital improvements plan, your 5-year capital improvements plan, so that you're making sure that you're putting facilities in the right place versus places that they could be harmed over time with sea level rise and severe storms and whatnot. The second one was to have a city resilience manager to kind of oversee all of these different strategies. The third one was funding mechanisms, so looking at ways that you would go about funding those things. They're never inexpensive, and sometimes you just have to start somewhere and also, of course, prioritize. And then the last one is community engagement, again, making sure that the community is aware so that, not only for before anything happens, that they can be using good best practices, but also afterward when you're pulling the community together, that the networks are strong and people are helping each other to spring back as quickly as possible. So the next, it's definitely not going to go through all these, but these were the actual strategies that were listed in the adaptation plan. I'm sure you've read them, but you can go back and read them again. I'll tell you that whenever I am updating your comprehensive plan, I'll be looking at each one of these to see which ones are policy related. So they're not specific actions that we wouldn't put this long list in the comp plan, but there are certain things that we can say the city will perform, they'll develop policies that relate to X, Y, and Z. So I'll go through these citywide adaptation strategies. There were strategies that were identified just west of US 19. Those that were along US 19, Ridge Road, Washington Street, Grand Boulevard, and Pine Hill Road. I believe those were in areas east of US 19. Specific policies for Cody River Landing. And then those related to stormwater management systems and infrastructure. I'm thinking citywide. And the last one is wetlands, marsh, or marsh environmental preservation. So again, those green infrastructure projects that would let you harness the power of nature, so to speak, to support, because there's green infrastructure and there's gray infrastructure. And they both have their uses and their benefits and their, I guess, their not impacts. Okay, so the next one is the next steps. Given that you want to go forward with these next steps, would be to draft the evaluation and appraisal report based comprehensive plan amendments that I spoke about earlier. You would present those at public meetings, including your planning and zoning board, this committee, certainly city council, and then ultimately city council would authorize staff to transmit those amendments to the state for review, and that needs to be accomplished by July 6th to be in compliance with the requirements. And I think that was it. I should have had a question slide, but so this is information mostly to get you thinking, because I think we should meet again to really kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the policies and the topics that would go in the policies. But I'm sure that you'll share this if you haven't already, and then people can you can read through it and just sort of be thinking about, because I'll know what you should do from a from a policy perspective to get state approval, but you know your community, you know where things are happening or where opportunities might lie. And those are things that I think would be, especially in conjunction with your adaptation plan results, to really kind of bring because you can't do it all right now. What are the priorities? You know, what are the things that you need to do first? And I know that you guys are the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Committee, but certainly, you know, your recommendations would rise up to the decision makers, this local governing body. Does anybody have any questions on the comp plan?
Yes, I do.
Well, I just wanted to say that you wanted this, so.
One comment I do have, and it's actually not so much to this though. You did have the recommendations for Cody River Landing from our previous report. Back there. We may want to integrate those when you do the website and everything else for the project.
Okay.
So people realize, hey, this is what we have to abide to, and what is recommended as the best for the resiliency of the city. So when people see the overall, you know, the future development of that area, you know, also keep these in mind too. They may ignore them, but at least that's their choice. But that's the direction that was recommended we should go to.
And this is really paramount, right? So looking at everything the city does through a resiliency lens is just a smart way to go about it. And just so you don't do something unintended, you know, but I agree. I think this would be really good information as a sort of that data walk, right?
Correct. Yeah. So this is the direction that we need to go in. How does these developments, whatever they may be, conform or conflict with this overall path that we need to go?
And I could see, like, for instance, identify opportunities to expand green space as opposed to hardened amenities. You know, as you know, I always say, I was on a phone call with a bunch of engineers today, and it's like, you know that there's something that you're going to do based on your best practices and safety. But when you take it to the community, they may have very different, there's more than one way to solve those problems. They might say, well, we think you should take away the surface parking and make it permeable pavement, or we think there should be a rain guard, whatever. There's many ways to solve for things. And engineers look to the community to decide, to help them to pick a solution that's best for that community. So I could see where people might look at this and say, well, this is the kind of green space I have in mind, you know, or whatever.
So we tell them to start thinking about those elements. Generally, people don't do it, but when you bring it up and say, hey, oh yeah, okay, well then, and it puts them down a direction.
And I think going through these and making sure they're plain language is probably a good.
Yes, yeah, definitely want to.
Yeah, because I was just looking at this Waterfront Alliance wedge design standards. I'm not even certain what that is, but anybody can look it up, but not necessarily in a.
They won't,
meeting.
so we need to explain it.
And does anybody else have any questions before I let the public speak?
Real quick, so in terms of the next steps, I think everyone's committed, hopefully, to be meeting on a regular basis, because there's a lot to do before July 6th.
Yes.
Went from 0 meetings to.
I'm just saying you wanted
It's like your part-time job now. Right?
He told me when I first got here, you know, he hasn't had a meeting yet on this.
I haven't had a meeting in 7 years. He comes on board, I have 3 meetings already.
That's what happens. Yeah, as you recall, last time I was here, I think I went through the ear-based amendment list. One of them is a water supply facilities work plan, which that's a little bit, it's not a huge lift, but it is a little bit more to put together than just a couple of policies. So that's something too that you need to factor in the timeline.
Right. Okay.
So.
The part is it wasn't done before, so
Yes.
we're doing it.
Yes.
So that's the good thing.
Not everybody's always on time with this, you know, it's extra stuff that cities don't always have time to deal with. So anyway, well, thank you. If there's any other questions, you can let me know.
Is there anyone, do you have anything? No. Sure. No. Is there anybody in the public that wishes to address this? No? Okay. Seeing as that is the last item on our agenda, before we leave the next meeting, when do you think you'd be ready?
I need to think about that a little bit.
Okay.
I have I'm doing this big training push in March with DOT across the state. So I think they're not certain of dates, but do you want to just get together? I mean, we could, like in 2 weeks, we could just start.
Yeah.
I don't have to.
Well, that's what I mean. I think we're kind of on this cycle that we could possibly meet every couple of weeks. At least for my schedule, I can make it
On
work.
Thursdays seems a good cadence.
Like Thursday at 4 still, or does that work?
Looking at the 14th? Yeah.
Yep. It's exactly the day I went to.
2 weeks. God forbid now, you don't have me coming here every 2 weeks.
Just trying to give you a reason to come in.
Is that the 14th?
Yes.
It's open.
Okay.
It's closed.
14th at
4
4 p.m. Be our next meeting. Okay. If there's nothing else.
Motion adjourned.
Don't need the motion.
Hit the gavel.
Adjourned.